But there was something so noble about that to me, that like everything that we did, you had to go work for, that I was able to have real conversations with people and empathize for where they were. Like I understood what it was to struggle.
Absolutely. All right, we're back with the second segment of the six. We're talking with Santo Cerami, the man. We just really spent the first segment talking about how you grew up, the circumstances, what you had to
Still
deal
working
with.
on that.
Yeah.
Still working on growing up, my man.
Straight up, we all are. We all little kid. We never lose that energy. We just can focus it differently. But now I love for the second segment. Thank you, Barney. To get into your first stint in professional business, the workforce.
Sure.
What'd that look like?
Well, I think to understand how I got started, you got to understand what my dad's philosophy was. My dad was brought into the car business by his dad, literally starting out at the bottom, and it was almost ceremonial.
Okay.
When I got started in the business, the first thing I ever did was that.
Like you're inducted in.
Yeah, it was. Think of like Goodfellas. When he gets pinched for the first time. Hey, well, it was not quite as glamorous as that. I was handed a mop and a bucket and cleaning supplies and told to go in and clean the technician locker room, which was a treacherous task, I promise you.
Wow.
And clean the customer bathrooms. And I remember not being too excited about that the first time I had to do it. I look back now, I know why my dad made me do that, but I started out cleaning the bathrooms. When I did end up finding my way out of college life and thinking I was going to, put on the nice suit and go sell cars on the showroom floor, which is what I'd always dreamt about anyway, my dad says, no, I've got you set up with Al down in service. You can report to him on Monday. And I said, service? He says, yeah, you're going into service. Al will tell you exactly what you're doing, but make sure you get fitted for uniforms. Wear a pair of jeans and a t-shirt when you go in there, and wear your work boots because you're going to work. And the first thing that they had me do was
no glitz and glamour for you.
No glitz and glamour. First thing they had me do was I had already run the lot as a lot attendant, if you will. We call them gophers these days, or lot attendants these days, gophers in those days.
Sure.
Now I was going into the new car prep department because I wasn't exactly skilled with the hands at that point. People used to run when they saw me with a tool in my hand in the shop.
This is blowing my mind. I mean, so you got a dad who owned the dealership at this point. What do you think caused him to make the decision? Like, why not? When he could have made you a salesman, he could have made you a manager, could have made you GM, back office.
He was far smarter than that. I think, truthfully, it was twofold. I think he wanted to see if he could scare me back into college by putting me in a position where I didn't want to be. But I also think he knew that I needed to learn the dealership business from the inside out, from the back to the front. And I'm really thankful that he did. As I look back retrospectively, he did me the greatest favor in the world. And that's what dads are supposed to do for their sons, and moms for their sons and daughters and whatnot. As parents, we're supposed to make sure we put our kids in a position where they can learn.
Absolutely.
And I spent a year in new car prep, and I did things like undercoat in the car. I put remember the Michelin Man? I had the white Michelin Man suit on. I'd go in there and undercoat the cars. It was a god-awful task, but my dad's philosophy was don't ever ask anybody to do something you haven't done or wouldn't do yourself.
So first of all, so he's instilling in you humility.
Yep.
No job. I'm not above any job. And then when you do rise up in the ranks, which I want you to get into, you don't look down on the people who did those things.
I appreciate them for everything they are and everything that they do.
So how'd you get out?
Well, the last step in that process was I got a chance to clean the oil-water separator in the shop. And if you've never cleaned an oil-water separator, imagine, walking into a sewer and not having anything to, cover your mouth and your nose with. I went in and cleaned out the slop in the water oil separator. The most god-awful task I've ever done in my life. There's been nothing ever in my life worse than that.
It sounds horrible.
But what happened was I got an opportunity to go up and become a service advisor's assistant. And a guy by the name of Vince Nubiel was the senior service advisor, and he took me under his wing. And they taught me how to write service, which is really taking care of customers when they need to service or maintain their vehicles. And I learned organizational skills from Vin. I learned how to take care of people the right way. I also learned how to kind of just hold it in when somebody's using improper language, let's say, about you and your family, not realizing that it's you standing across from them. When they're upset about something about their vehicle that really was out of our control. But I had to learn how to kind of just bite my lip. Great.
I want to go deep because I think people are hearing what you're doing, but think about what you said. He was trying to scare me back into college.
Yeah, sure.
What is your mindset as you're coming through this? Do you feel like, hey, nothing's going to stop me, I'm going to get to where I'm going?
It's a great question.
Because a lot of people would say, you know what, I am going back to college. Forget this.
It's a great lesson in having a real, genuine passion inside of you and a desire to want to achieve something. And I knew I wanted to get to the front end of the business. Little did I know the back end would be the greatest education I've ever had in this business. But that got me up in the morning. I was not going to be told no at that point. I was going to do whatever I needed to do to get where I wanted to get, ultimately. And I took a little bit of a circuitous route to get there.
Absolutely.
But I learned a lot in the...
You're willing to pay the price because
I had no choice. I had no choice. Where was I going? I had already, flunked out of college. I had already, shown the world that education wasn't my strong suit.
But at this point, you had your eye on a goal.
Yeah, well, I like to learn about the car business. Like that, I really enjoyed. So when more experienced and seasoned people spoke, I paid attention. I remember my cousin going to the NADA General Dealership Management Academy a couple years ahead of me. And I remember saying that was the first real big goal that I had. I wanted to actually get to the academy and learn about the business of the business. I remember asking my dad the first time, and my dad saying, "You're not ready for that. Do you have any idea what kind of an investment that is? That's a $30,000 investment, and we're not ready to make that investment. You have to show me that you're worthy of the investment." And I spent the next 3 years in change in the service department, various different roles, but mainly as a service advisor and a dispatcher in the shop. Handling, shop loading and workflow. It was a great education. I learned from some really, really quality, talented people. And then I had an opportunity to go upstairs and go onto the showroom floor and sell. And it was bittersweet because, truthfully, at that point, it was a Monday through Friday gig in the service department. And as a young man, I like to go out on a Friday night, my man. I'll tell you that.
Right. And now you're moving into commission-based sales.
I was always paid. That's another thing my dad did. Whatever the comp plan was at that point in time, I was on the same comp plan as everybody else. There was no guarantee. It was like if you wanted to earn, you had to go to work. Simple as that. But when I got the shot to go upstairs and sell, I remember being really excited about it and then going, oh, shoot. I got to work Saturdays, man. I don't want to work Saturdays, But that was part of the gig. And what I learned really quickly on was that was where the excitement was. That was where all the action was happening. Not to say that I didn't spend a few Friday nights, out later than I should have been.
Coming in Saturday morning, eating that cup of coffee.
Two, three.
Espresso.
Espresso, a couple of toothpicks for the eyelids to keep them open, but it was a great time. I had an experience on the floor where I learned from absolute professionals. I mean, guys that, at that point in time, you got to remember, you're talking about the late 80s. Honda was just coming into its own. Toyota wasn't what Toyota is today. The Highlines were really Cadillac at that point in Lincoln. There was really Lexus was just starting to come to the forefront. Lexus, Acura, BMW wasn't what BMW is today. Mercedes wasn't, Audi. There's such different brands today than there were back then. We were a powerhouse.
Right.
We were delivering at that point, probably 1,800 cars to 2,000 cars a year, new and used. It was a different business.
Absolutely.
But I had a lot of fun. And what I learned...
You're how old is this at this time?
At this point, I'm in my early 20s, mid-20s, and I'm learning the business from really successful people. One of the biggest influences on me, I would be remiss if I didn't say Ed Abrazizi, our general manager at the time, who was still a friend of mine today, a really huge influence on me, was really kind of the guy that corralled me and slowed me down a little bit because I was living a pretty fast-paced life at that point in time. Had me and my dog at that point. That was it. I had really no responsibilities. And Ed showed me the path to bigger and better things in my life. And I'm forever grateful to him for that influence and the time that I spent with him. I remember moving from the showroom floor into the F&I box. I spent about 4.5 years in the F&I box as a working F&I manager.
Now, was this your decision or was this Dad's decision?
At that point, my dad had really surrendered me to Ed. And it was Ed's call and Ed's decision. Ed was the GM at the point.
So he's running, okay.
He was the one that gave me my first opportunity to go into the box. Had a chance to learn the F&I aspect of the business.
You know, it's amazing that you've gone all around the dealership.
Yeah.
So now you can effectively, as we get into your next stint and what you did, you can really talk to every position in the dealership because you've actually done it.
Yeah, no question. I mean, things have changed over the course of the last 10 to 15 years with the advent of the internet and the digital age, but the basics are still there in every single department. I enjoy those conversations. I enjoy rolling up my sleeves and getting involved in every department.
And what I've heard is you were always a little bit ahead of your time when it comes to your ideas and what you saw.
There's a word for that. It's called crazy, Double D. A little ahead of my time. Yeah.
It's the nice version of you.
I don't know that I would say that. I mean, it's very nice. I appreciate that. I think it's more that I grew up in a way that I didn't fear risk.
Right. You were willing to push the envelope a little bit.
I pushed the envelope my whole life growing up, got into trouble, but it never killed me. And so I think that breeds a little bit of contempt for security.
Exactly.
I never sought security as much as I sought to be alive and to have fun and to be passionate about something. And so I was not afraid to take a risk. As I progressed through the chairs in the dealership, it was more Machiavellian, my dad stepping back and me stepping in to fill a role, leadership-wise at the dealership. It was a tough time because General Motors business over my career wasn't growing; it was actually declining dramatically, and specifically my brands. I mean, we had Pontiac, GMC, and Isuzu. It's a 52-year-old business that went up in a puff of smoke in 2008. But I did have a chance to learn how to do business. I was with GM when
we lost Pontiac. So I know. So what was your position when you assumed the leadership role?
So it was more de facto dealer principal or co-GM with Ed. And Ed and I, look, and I would be disingenuous if I didn't say it, and Ed, you know this, we had differences of opinion and differences of perspective and certainly differences in our visions. It caused a split for the two of us, in the early 2000s. Ed made a decision to go in a different direction, which I respected. We went through a tough time together, but we've reconciled since, thankfully, because we're bigger men today than we were.
It's tough. The scripture says, and I'm no expert, but money answers all things. Which means when everyone's making money and business is growing, everybody's happy.
No doubt.
When business is declining from a manufacturer's standpoint, something like nationwide, it becomes very tough to make the decisions of how you're going to outgrow the manufacturer.
No question about it. And it's funny because I say that about my relationship with Ed in this respect. I probably didn't handle it as well as I could have and should have. I'm an emotional guy, as you know. I'm a passionate guy. I've been wrong, but I've never been in doubt, as they say. So when I want to make a point, I make a point. And Ed, to his credit, he bit his lip, I'm sure, plenty of times. But when Ed left, it gave me a chance to grow up a lot as a leader. We went through some tough transitions. I mean, when my grandfather passed away in 2001, in May of 2001, the end of May, very tough time. A old estate plan. The estate plan was like 18 years old, so it caused a lot of challenges with my family, the family dynamics, and so we had to actually swim through like a sewer pipe of garbage for 21 months. I lost my floor plan lender, had massive litigation back and forth amongst family members, a lot of divergent opinions on where we wanted to be and where we were going to go. And we were in a bit of a pickle at that point in time. And some of it my own doing and some of it the doing of, the folks at GM and the market and circumstances. We put Humpty Dumpty back together again. We had a great run, 2003 through 2007. And like 2007, I should digress. I mean, my wife Mary deserves as much of the credit, because when we put Humpty Dumpty back together again in 2003, I was not able to get traditional financing. I had to go to a private lender. We had to do an interest-only loan, almost $3 million. We liquidated everything. We sold our house. We liquidated Mary's 401k, my own personal savings, and we put everything we had in to buy the store from my dad.
Where were you living at this point?
We had just purchased the house. It's funny, that story is funny as well, because in 1997 we purchased a house in Wyckoff, New Jersey. Mary was working at the time for Samsung. She had made it through 2 rounds of downsizing and cuts at Samsung, and we closed on the house. 3 weeks after we closed on the house, she got downsized and laid off. And we were counting on her income, to pay the bills. We figured it out, though. She went right to work on her own with her own business, and then went to work with the YMCA in town. Had a great run over there. We figured it out, and then as I said, a couple of years later, we ended up buying the store. Vis-a-vis, my grandfather's passing and the disastrous estate plan. But we put it back together again. We did an interest-only loan. We paid back interest only for almost 2 years before we were able to actually get GMAC to come in and take the lender out. And we enjoyed a great run. And in about 2007, I remember saying to Mary, look, I don't like the way business is going. I mean, it's slowing down and declining to a point where it really scares me. We had a very healthy rent factor that we were paying at that point. We're paying almost $72,000 a month in rent.
Just rent.
And equivalent, yep. And I stopped taking the salary out of the place for a long period of time. I had a partner in crime over there, Regina Kinsella, who was my controller. Without her and my attorney, Joe Boyan, Hollywood knows Regina.
Cue the claps
Regina's
for Regina.
like one of the most spectacular people in the world.
Well, it's amazing.
Introduced me to my wife. Thank God.
Wow. So it's a thankless for multiple reasons. Thank God for Regina. But it's amazing when you look back at, because this is tough times.
Very tough.
I mean, let's not sugarcoat it. If you're not listening, this sounds to me. I mean, you lost your lender, your major dealership, manufacturer's declining.
Yep.
Mary loses her job a couple weeks after you buy a house in a Bergen County suburb. Yep. So it wasn't like, it's a nice house.
Oh, yeah.
And so, this is rockiness. This isn't, hey, we're just coasting along here, cashing checks.
And my son born at that point, 2001.
Right.
So there was a lot going on. But, look, I married the right lady. I tell you that it's been the biggest difference maker in my life. It's the thing I'm most proud of, is my decision to settle down, and the fact that I was blessed to be introduced to her. I had a crush on her for years before I even spoke to her, truthfully. But we made it through that, and we woke up in 2007 and things were not great, and we decided at that point in time we were going to try and find a different location for the dealership so that we can relieve ourselves on the rent factor side. Was not successful in accomplishing that. And we made the decision to get out at that point in time. And I remember in September of 2008, which is a daunting time, because Lehman Brothers up in a puff of smoke. Big lenders, big investment banks up in a puff of smoke.
The world's crashing down.
What's that? The financial
world,
complete
banking,
ruin.
Housing,
Absolutely.
Cars, everything. So
I remember in November of 2008, got a call from General Motors that they would finally agree to purchase our franchises. Now remember, 52 years in business, and they had dragged their feet. They didn't want to pay us for our franchises, which was as per New Jersey statute. We finally strike a deal with them. We make the announcement that we're going to close the doors on Black Friday of 2008, the day after Thanksgiving. A lot of tears, a lot of emotion, but a lot of people that were supportive and came over and gave me a hug and thanked me. And I was like, I remember being blown away. Like, I was thankful that they had hung in with us as long as they did. We shut the doors December 1st of 2008. And in February of 2009, after not hearing from General Motors for 2.5 months, I get a phone call from the parts rep informing me that our deal with GM was included in the GM bankruptcy proceeding, and that we could file a claim online.
Good Lord.
I still had about $2.5 million worth of cars that I was paying the floor plan on. paying $20,000 a month just to store them over on the lot to Prestige, who had purchased the property from the dealership, was lost. I was like Kane from Kung Fu, walking the earth and having experiences. I would get in my car and drive around, and had no place to go. I would just drive around,
trying to get away from
just trying to wrap my head around, like, what am I going to do next? I had 2 little babies at home. My daughter Anna had been born at that point. Mary was working, but part-time. We were running out of money. I hadn't made mortgage payment for months. Had really run through all of our available cash because I still had the $20,000 a month to pay in rent for the cars, $32,000 a month for floor plan interest. I just stopped paying my mortgage.
You were all invested. You were totally invested.
It's called cross-collateralized, my man. I learned what cross-collateralized meant real quickly. I woke up in May of 2009 and I was broke and broken. And I remember sitting in my car. I had a burgundy Cadillac CTS with beige interior, and I remember reaching into my pocket. I was about to get in the car and take a ride to a place we call nowhere, because I had nothing to do and I didn't know what to do. I was paralyzed by my own indecision, and I reached into my pocket and I had $11. I had 6 singles wrapped by a $5 bill, and I pushed a little button that popped a little tray out with all my change in there, and I had about $3 in change. I had about a half a tank of gas. Was now about 5 months behind on my mortgage. Had foreclosure papers sitting on the seat next to me. And I was terrified, to be honest with you. I just started to cry. And I walked in the back door of my house crying, and my wife said to me, like, honey, you got to figure this out. You got to do something, because something is always better than nothing. You're a smart person. Figure it out. And I left there and went to Starbucks in Wyckoff.
How old are you at this point?
This is 2009. So this is 10 years ago. I'm 42 years old.
So you're 42 years old. You've worked
at that point 20 years.
Yeah, almost 20 years of your adult life, and you're looking at it and saying, nothing's working at this point.
Buddy, I'm a failure. That voice inside my head, that six-inch space was a minefield.
Because this is where, and we asked the question, was there ever a time where you wanted to give up? And to me,
I was there.
This is where you were at this point.
I was.
How do you come out of this when everything?
I was ready to cry uncle and give up at that point in time. When I walked in the back door of my house and my wife said to me, "I believe in you," like those words, I still hear them. I believe in you.
Mary.
And amen to Mary. Thank you, honey. I love you, because I don't know that I keep going without that.
Right.
And but I thought about my kids. I thought about my dad. I really felt that I had disappointed a lot of people at that point. And as I said, like, the voice inside my head was telling me, you're a failure, you have no college education. The automobile business was imploding around us. But when I went to Starbucks, I sat down, I had a yellow legal pad and a pen, and I said, I have a business plan here in my head. We're going to come out of this. I didn't know how the automobile business was going to come out of it, but I knew banking on the other side of the river in Manhattan was going to experience a little bit of pain as well, as they were at that point in time. I said, there's going to be a lot of smart people, qualified people. If I could train them and place them in the car business, I could get paid to train them and paid to place them in dealerships, because there's always a dearth of talent. And that was my business plan. I wrote 328 names down on a yellow legal pad. Had no name for the company, but I had a concept. I knew what I wanted to do.
So if you're listening, and I mean, how could you not be listening? Because this pulls at your heartstrings, because I think everyone has been at a low point. And you're at the bottom of the bottom. And, Mary's belief in you, you thinking about your children, sparks, the fire is dim, but it's better than it being out.
It's still there.
If it's a little ember,
That's all we need. That's all we need.
And then you get a vision. You get a vision of something. And I think a lot of people spend time when things get bad focusing. Their vision is what is.
Right.
They're looking around and saying, this is all it is, and that becomes their vision.
Right.
You said, I'm going to put my eye on something else, and you started working towards that. You wrote down
328 names on a legal pad. These were people that I knew, that I felt like if I reached out to them, they would at least have a conversation with me. I remember closing my first deal with Applied Selling Dynamics to do sales training.
You're proving the concept.
Well, let me say this to you. It was somebody that I knew, somebody that I had a great relationship with, and somebody who never paid me. And truthfully, Double D, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I just figured I was going to do something. I didn't know how to ask for the check because I had never done a transaction like that where I was selling something so ethereal.
Right.
I mean, F&I, you're doing that, but there's a piece of paper and you know there's something behind it. This was brand new. This was just me. I was selling, my IP, my intellectual property, my experience. And so that was a tough experience. I still talk to that gentleman today. I still consider him a friend. I don't think he realized that he didn't pay me. I think that he thought that somebody had, handled the remuneration, but I was too embarrassed to ask him for the check, which is odd because I needed it like I needed oxygen.
Right.
Like we had no money. My house was in foreclosure. I had to get up and put the game face on every time I did the trainings. But that led me to another opportunity with a wonderful organization. And that domino right there was the one that started it all happening. I gained some confidence, did some wonderful work, took a dealership group from, like 17 or 18 in their market up to number 1.
Wow.
And it was doing things that we already knew we should be doing, but reminded them how to do it in a little bit better way.
Because you're not a coach. Versus being,
no, it's just,
I mean, you're in the game with them, but you could take an objective look at what everyone's doing and see the missing pieces. And
here's the best part about what I get to do when it comes to sales training or working with a client. It's like what I do is no different than what they do every single day, with one big exception. Like I don't have a salary, I don't have a bonus plan, I don't have benefits. I don't have a car allowance or a demo. Like everything that we do is we eat what we kill, if you will.
Absolutely.
For lack of a better way of putting it. But there was something so noble about that to me that like everything that we did, you had to go work for. That I was able to have real conversations with people and empathize for where they were. Like I understood what it was to struggle.
Absolutely.
And I think when people understand that you know what it is to struggle when they're struggling, they have a propensity to listen and to engage and to try things that they might not be comfortable with because you recommended to them.
Use relatability. We talk about
relatability, man. I learned how to tell stories. I got involved in a network marketing opportunity with some great people. My buddy Joe Barricata, owe you forever. Got introduced to things conceptually that changed my life. I learned how to learn at that point in my life. I learned how to read, listen, participate. I got introduced to audio programs. There's an old saying that says, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Amen.
And I'm a living, breathing example of that. I was a guy that, hated learning, hated school, and found a way to love learning because it helped advance.
The involvement of Santo Cerami, we have a lot more to get to. We're going to have to do another segment. That's just a fact.
No worries.
But we're going to have to come back for a third segment. What I'm hearing and what I hope everyone got out of this so far is that because the story does get better, and
it better get better, right? It better get better than that.
It gets better, but when you look at what a person, you never know what a person's been through. We look at people's success. It's so easy to look at someone's results and say, wow, I would love their life, but you didn't pay the price they paid.
Yeah.
I'm hearing you never changed. As a kid, you developed that nature where you became you weren't scared to take a risk just because of the nature of how you were raised.
No.
In school, when you first got into the business. Now, like you said, I don't have the security of a check, but you've built yourself. You kind of calloused yourself to where you don't need it, and you've adjusted and come out of dark times, got a vision for what could be, and then went to creating that vision and literally pulled yourself out, which we'll go more into applied selling dynamics, the 6 on the next segment. But totally, I mean, if you're not inspired by that, you know, I don't know what to say. You know, like we need to pinch you to make sure that you're not a corpse at this point, because that is what it's about. So,
but the truth is, everybody out there has a story and a challenge, and
for sure,
and I share that with them. So we'll get to the next segment. We'll share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, looking forward to it. We'll see you on the next segment.